Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening once again to provide you some updates about some of the developments around justice for Daunte Wright. We have with us Jonathan, Nakima, um, Zainab, Tashira, Jess, and Michelle. I wanted to just start us off a little bit and talk about some of the latest updates. So obviously today we know that we got notice of the charges that Officer Kim Potter has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. We know that's not what we've been asking for. We want more stronger charges, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more. Earlier this morning, the Senate People of Color Posse Caucus held a press conference where they demanded the governor and the speaker to halt any and all budget and policy conversations until we pass meaningful police accountability bills. Midday today, we also had a chance to move some of those bills forward, qualified immunity, strengthening civilian oversight, and also, I believe, the 48-hour bill. So we've had those bills move forward. And then this afternoon, we had another protest outside. People are obviously still outside right now, but we had a protest outside in front of the police department. We are obviously called on the governor to assign a special prosecutor to Daunte Wright's case so that we see proper charges come forward. And so it's extremely important that we continue to do that. There are many people who have been asking, what can we do? What is important right now? And the first most important thing is to realize that we need to continue to put pressure, because every and all of the changes that we have seen so far have been because of the public pressure. It's also been because people are not sitting at home. They're coming outside to the streets in a pandemic, continuing and demanding justice. And so we need to continue to do that. While all of this is happening, we also are aware that the Derek Chauvin trial is going on, and the defense is putting on some bogus, obviously, witnesses trying to really paint a picture that George Floyd was not killed by Derek Chauvin, but we all know that it's not the case. So I want to give a chance to our community activists and leaders today with us who can kind of chime in. Michelle, do you want to start us off? I want to talk a little bit about the arrestee hotline and some of the things that we're asking people to kind of keep in mind, and then we can kind of loop in.
Sure. One of the things that we want to make sure that people know about is we do have an important arrestee hotline. If you are a person that was arrested over the last few days, if you are related to one of those folks, then the arrestee hotline is 612-444-2654. And this is important to know because what we have seen over the last few days is that police have escalated. People are out there protesting peacefully, and then the police suddenly escalate. And last night, 55 people were arrested. They sat on buses for hours. They were not permitted to leave, and in some cases, some people attempted to leave. And now these are people that had not committed any crimes, except they were out there after the curfew. And I question whether that curfew was even proper or legal. But nonetheless, they were out there, and that was the only crime. And that is a petty misdemeanor. It's something that you get a citation for. And instead of letting people just leave, what they did was they penned people up in buses. In one case, one young man's wrists were so tightly handcuffed with those plastic flex cuffs that his hands turned purple within 5 minutes. And this is ridiculous. This is shameful. And basically, they held him on buses for several hours, took them to Hennepin County Government Center, Hennepin County Jail, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a pandemic, where they're not supposed to be putting people in jail unless it's absolutely necessary. Put them all in there, and those folks are still there now. They're making them wait till tomorrow to see the judge because they know this is bogus, and this is their way of like putting the punishment out on the front end. So because they know these charges are never going to stick, it's just bogus charges, and no one engaged in any kind of violence except the police, and so people should keep that in mind. Don't call the arrestee hotline unless you are calling about a person that got arrested or you are a person that got arrested, because we do want to make sure that the people that hotline stays free for actual arrestees and so forth. So don't call it up with questions or things like that. That isn't the place to do that. But this is a hotline that's operated by the National Lawyers Guild and the Legal Rights Center. So you're going to be covered very well. And please know, and also something else that is important to know is that there was no social distancing on these buses, and most of the cops were not wearing masks either. They were going right in people's faces with no masks and grabbing people. It was ridiculous. And at one point they even shot, I can't remember if it was a concussion grenade or a tear gas canister into the apartment building and into one of the apartments of the residents that were nearby. All of a sudden, this family comes busting out of their apartment going, you better quit, and like they're shoving this thing out of their apartment. And they said, we have babies in our apartment. What is wrong with you? This was the level of brutality and force that was happening last night. And it's truly disgusting and it's unacceptable, especially after when people are protesting the brutality that got us in this place in the first place. So I'm going to stop talking, but I think that's really key.
Well, thanks for that, Michelle, for that update. And for those folks, the number is right there, 612-444-2654. Please share that with folks who need it. And as Michelle said, do not call unless you really need to use that to free it up. There are other resources available once you call that you can learn more about that. So I want to bring Nikema, if you wanted to just kind of summarize that a lot of things have happened today, and trying to wrap our mind around all of the different things that have happened today, and continuously what we need to continue to put pressure on.
Yes. So first, I just want to commend everyone who has been standing up for justice for Daunte Wright, starting with the Black youth, excuse me, who were present on Sunday at the scene where Daunte was killed, and then who went to the Brooklyn Center Police Department to advocate, and we joined them there, right? And got the ball rolling in terms of applying the pressure that was needed for a series of things to happen. As we've talked about earlier in the week, we went to City Hall on Monday. We demanded the firing of the city manager. We can check that box off. That happened. And this is not something to be taken lightly, because the city manager was a man who had been in that position for over 20 years. So think about the amount of political capital that he had garnered over those more than 2 decades of service to Brooklyn Center. And we were able to come in and really apply the pressure for him to be fired. And a big part of why he was fired was because of the fact that he, as a city manager, according to their city charter, had authority over the police department. On Sunday night, when we were out there, what we experienced were the police being extremely aggressive. They turned off the lights outside of the police department and inside, so you could not see anything. You couldn't see badge numbers. You couldn't see who was who. They sprayed tear gas on people who were peacefully protesting. They also shot rubber bullets as well as flashbang grenades. So it was really terrifying being out there Sunday night. And many of us have been in a lot of protests, but this was pretty extreme. They forced us to go across the street, or they threatened arrest. We went across the street, and then they shot all those things I just mentioned across the street, which was completely ridiculous. And some people got injured, including some of the young people who were out there that night. We also, on that Monday, pressured the city to fire the chief of police. And the reason we wanted to push for the firing of the chief of police was because he was arrogant. He was aggressive in his, spirit and energy. He was not remorseful about any of the tactics that the police had used on Sunday night against protesters. He was defensive on behalf of Kim Potter. He wouldn't even release her name. He caped for her by claiming it was an accident without even knowing the full story. It was just completely ridiculous. So we said, you got to go. He told us he wasn't going anywhere. But by the next day, he resigned. We also pushed for the firing of Kim Potter. Before we knew her name, we knew she was a veteran. We knew the claims that she supposedly accidentally fired a taser instead of a gun. Fired a gun instead of a taser, which we do not believe. But we pushed for her to be fired. The fact that she's a 26-year veteran, the fact that she was a field training officer, the fact that she was the president of the union. So she should have known better, given her heightened level of experience, training, and expertise in handling of a firearm, the difference between a firearm and a taser. It's not rocket science. You can see from the video, she held the gun in her hand for several seconds, yelled out taser. And some people are like, it was an accident. She yelled out taser. How many times have we heard cops on their body camera footage saying, he's got a gun, he's got this, setting themselves up to justify murder?
Yes.
So don't be fooled by that. I don't care what she yelled out. The point is, she knew better. She should have known better. She needs to be held accountable under the law, just as any of us would be if we did something like that. And so, of course, we not only pressed for her to be fired, which she was allowed to resign ahead of time. We're still waiting on word as to whether or not the mayor agreed to accept her resignation, which we asked him not to do so. We said, fire her instead. So we're seeing, the jury's still out in terms of whether he actually fired her. But we did also press for criminal charges, which we saw happen today. Second-degree manslaughter charges. Some people, which is not enough. We still think murder charges should be brought in this case, primarily because of what we saw with regard to Muhammad Noor, the former Minneapolis police officer, who is a Black Muslim Somali man, first officer ever convicted of killing a civilian. And she happened to be a white affluent woman. We know that wasn't a coincidence. We know that race was a factor. So in this situation, we're saying if you could manipulate the third-degree murder statute to apply to an accidental shooting of Justine Rusacek Damon by a Black Muslim Somali officer, then you can manipulate the statute once again to hold a white woman officer accountable for racially profiling a young Black man, using excessive force. Even a taser would have been excessive force under those circumstances. Because remember, they claim they stopped him for an expired tab in the midst of a pandemic, which is ridiculous. And then because they got caught with their pants down, meaning that Daunte Wright told his mom while he was on the phone with her, they pulled me over because I had an air freshener hanging on my mirror, which I think was the real reason for that stop. That was really racially profiling. He was driving a nice, beautiful new white car. And that's why, and a young Black man, that's why I think that they stopped him. And then they came up with the reason saying, oh, we found a warrant, blah, blah, blah. But from my perspective, racial profiling was the original reason for the stop. And she could have easily treated the young man like a human being. She could have looked at him like she would have looked at a young white male, like he was her son, and given him a warning, a ticket, and allowed him to continue living his best life. Instead, she became judge, jury, and executioner. So I don't care how many white woman tears she cries. She needs to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. And that's what we are pushing for. Some people have asked, why is the Washington County attorney taking on this case? And the reason that he is able to make the charging decision is, one, Mike Freeman is a coward, period. Which you guys all know, if you've been paying attention, he's a coward, doesn't hold cops accountable. And he came up with an agreement with other metro area prosecutors saying that depending on the case, if there's a conflict of interest, they might transfer the case to a different jurisdiction. So this has happened before. That is how the case got into the hands of Washington County Attorney Pete Orpett. Part of the problem is that Pete Orpett does not have a history of holding killer cops accountable. He also has worked for the Minnesota Peace Officers Association. He also works routinely with cops, which means he does not have an incentive to charge Kim Potter to the fullest extent of the law nor does he have an incentive to prosecute this case as rigorously as he should. We have a lot of concerns about him taking on this case. The fact that he could bring third-degree murder charges or even second-degree murder charges and move forward with an aggressive prosecution of this case. So we are pushing for Governor Walz to get his bloop out of his bloop and transfer the case over to the Attorney General, which he has the authority to do under his executive power. And it's not that we trust Attorney General Keith Ellison. I personally don't. But the reality is that the Attorney General can then transfer the case to a special prosecutor, which many of us believe is important because of the nature of an independent special prosecutor. No one who will cover for the police because they work for them. They want to maintain the relationship. They don't want to be retaliated against. And that is the case for many prosecutors in the metro area. So we need a paradigm shift if we want to see accountability happen. This is one way to make that happen. And this would not have happened without the power of the people. So that is my update. I'm glad there were charges. It's not enough. We need to keep applying the pressure. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nakeem. I want to bring in Tashira. I know you've been in contact with the mother of Daunte Wright, and it's been difficult for the families, all the work that you've been doing. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the updates on that, and everything else that's been happening?
Yes, I've been talking a lot with the mother. Just being a family myself that lost a loved one. I'm very grateful how receptive his family has been of me. And I just want them to know, as someone who has walked this walk for 11 years, my heart is hurting so bad. You know, as we talked about before, the day that this happened, I had worked so hard on keeping my son's father, Justin Tigan, named alive, as I try to do for all of our families. I'm pushing to keep all of our loved ones' name alive because, you know, we don't always get the media to know about our stories. And so it's so many more families that led up to George Floyd, that led up to Daunte Wright, and had these people in the political seats listen to us, there would not be a George Floyd. There would not be a Daunte Wright had they passed the bills that we were fighting for last summer when they murdered George Floyd, when the police murdered him. We may not even made it to a Daunte Wright because the rules would have changed. The laws that permit this stuff to happen would have changed. So it was very hard for me because a lot of people don't know about Justin Tigan's story. And so I had worked diligently to do this event, and I had to end up wrapping it up and leaving to go let this mother cry on my shoulder and to pray with her. That hurts. You know, that hurts because I knew I had to be there for her, but it also hurt for me because here I am trying to, you know, get people to hear Justin Tigan's story, you know, and not just because he was the father of my son, because he was a human being that died in a dumpster, that was beat to death by the police here in the state of Minnesota. Murders like that, and murders like Cordell Handy, Jeffrey Smith, Kobe Heisler, that he died a couple months before Daunte, not a couple months, but some months before Daunte, in the same area, blocks away, same officer involved in that killing as well. And nothing was done about it. So this has been allowed to happen. This has literally been allowed. And that's why we always say the whole system is guilty. Because we're watching the BCA, the police departments, the county attorneys, and even the media, all of these people are involved with covering up murders that led up to Daunte Wright and George Floyd. But I am just grateful that I have been able to pretty much mentor and be there for this hurting mother. But my heart is in my stomach, and here I am as a family myself, someone that had my life taken away from me thanks to the police here in Minnesota. Here I am rushing out of an event for my loved one, going out there, walking into the lion's den, because let me tell you something. When I arrived at that where it happened on Sunday, after I left the event that I was holding, when I arrived there, the youth were upset, rightfully upset, and it was chaotic. And I sat in the vehicle with a young lady that said, I'm going to get shot today, and I don't even care because I'm tired of them killing my people. A 17-year-old girl. And then the chief of police tells me the next day that there was no youth out there. He wasn't out there. We were out there. Community leaders were out there. And families that already lost loved ones were out there. Myself, Kobe Heisler mother, Travis Jordan people, we were all out there trying to calm these youth down, doing something that they should have been doing. They created this situation. It's beyond inhumane what this state has done to our community and to our families. And today I ended up meeting with the chief in St. Paul, as well as Melissa Hortman. And I clearly let them know we're tired of their empathies. We're tired of, I'm sorry for your loss. Anytime you're sorry for something, you do everything in your power to change it moving forward. We understand that we can't change what happened in the past, but moving forward, there needs to be some changes. And if you're truly sorry, you do everything in your power as a human being to make changes going forward. We understand that you can't do everything. Everything is not into your capacity. But whatever is, as a human being, you do that if you're truly sorry. That's what I told them today, because I'm doing everything within my capacity, and I haven't harmed or hurt anyone. I haven't taken anyone's life, and I'm doing everything within my capacity. So if you represent this state, then you should be doing everything within your capacity. And that's what I told them today. I will continue to be there for this family and the rest of the families, no matter what, because they're walking through pain that I've walked through for 11 years, and it's nothing to play with. This pain is nothing to play with. And it hurts me because I feel like I'm doing something that this state should be doing. These elected officials should be doing this stuff. But it's okay, because the people that's on this call right now, God created us and put us in this fight right now for a reason. He knew that we were going to be the ones to carry this out. And that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. That's incredible. Have to deal with this pain and trauma all the time, and to share it, you yourself are dealing with this, and I saw you on Sunday, how difficult it was, and then all of a sudden, not even getting a chance to memorialize Justin, and have to rush and immediately be consoling another mother. it's not easy. It's not easy, and we really need to do something about this. And that's why we're really focused on solutions. And you and the families have been pushing us to work to develop these bills that we have now, that we have a chance to bring forth. And so I want to give Jonathan a minute here to maybe jump in and talk about you and Michelle today testified on bills that were going through and had some meetings. Maybe you can do a quick wrap up of the bills again for folks who are not aware of those bills, and I'll put in the action on the chat here for folks who are watching right now. Feel free to share the video. Feel free to also take this action. I think we've got now 2,200 people that have taken the action, and I'm hoping that more people can do that. I know there's also a petition on Move On that was created yesterday that has almost 60,000 people that have signed on to support these bills, and so there's more attention now than we've had before. So Jonathan, can you give us a kind of a brief overview of those bills again?
Yes. The first bill that was heard today was civilian oversight. That was strengthened. I want to say that civilian oversight. I'm gonna let Michelle talk about that one a little bit more next. But civilian oversight received probably the most interest from the GOP, the other side, and pushback on that one, and I just thought that was really silly. The next bill was the qualified immunity bill, which is where we thought a majority of the fireworks were going to be, but to our surprise, there really wasn't that many fireworks on qualified immunity. I think that the legislators got it. They tried to use some defunct arguments and played a couple games with some words and a 1983 actions. But those were shot down, and it passed, and was sent to the general registry. The next bill was the 48-hour bills, allowing body cameras to be reviewed by the families within 48 hours of a critical incident. That was something that came out of a family story that Kobe Heisler actually story, and that bill also passed and made it to the registry. So and I even think that after these bills pass, it's my understanding that one of the Republican representatives contacted one of the Democratic representatives and expressed interest in one of the bills that he did not vote for. So I'm hopeful that some of these legislative initiatives are moving forward. However, I think I'm discouraged because why did it take Daunte Wright to get legislators to take this legislation seriously? And it shouldn't have took that. These bills we were pushing this summer after the murder of George Floyd during the special session, and we were preaching and praying and calling and boots on the ground, the whole nine, about why these pieces of legislation were so important. And legislators were putting it on the back burner. They weren't taking it seriously. They were stalling, having delay tactics. And then as soon as Daunte was murdered, the next thing you know, our phones are lighting up and everybody wants to start pushing criminal justice reform legislation and wants to do press conferences. So I was a little bit discouraged by that, because that shouldn't have had to happen for them to take these bills seriously, and I'm really disappointed in that. So as it relates to the bills, that's where we were at with the bills. As for my feelings on the murder charge, I think that's a joke, and I think that this officer, former officer, should be charged with a slew of charges, because if it was anybody else who murdered an innocent person, they're going to be charged with they're going to throw the book at them. And here it is that she got one charge thrown at her while she gets private security around her house. And that's just crazy to me. I just want to point out that under Minnesota Statute 609-195, murder in the third degree, it reads, whoever without intent to effect the death of any person causes the death of another by perpetrating an act imminently dangerous to others and evincing a depraved mind without regard for human life is guilty of murder in the third degree and may be sentenced to imprisonment of not more than 25 years. So what is evincing a depraved mind? Examples of a depraved mind murder include violently driving an automobile and accidentally discharging of a gun during a fight. That's what a depraved mind is, and that's what they claim that happened. All the elements are met, and I don't see why they haven't charged her with a more serious crime. But we're going to sit over here and work on that, and hopefully we can get a prosecutor who will do their job and treat her just like they would treat any one of us.
Thanks, Jonathan. Before Michelle can talk, I wanted to bring in Jess. I know you testified also on the civilian oversight, civilian review or civilian oversight, and how critical that was. And that was the bill that Jonathan was mentioning about getting Republicans actually to jump on that, support that. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure.
And also some of the actions that people can take, and I'll put up that graphics.
Sure. Obviously we have a whole legislative agenda, and each piece just is one small step towards addressing accountability for police in our state. Right now, we have a set of laws. About half the states in the country have laws that protect law enforcement above the protections that civilians experience. They're called the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. And one of those pieces is a restriction on civilian oversight and not giving community members, citizens of our state, any say over how our communities are policed, and specifically preventing us from having a voice in reviewing complaints and disciplining officers. Today in the hearing, one of the things that I also was surprised at the response from Republicans. One of the Republican legislators actually asked, he was from Shakopee, and he was talking about how great the police in Shakopee are. Let it be noted, there have been police murders in Shakopee just the year before last, at least. I know the Native community experiences a lot of racist abuse at the hands of Shakopee police. That said, he thinks the police department there is great. And he had talked to his buddy at the police department, who was very upset about civilian oversight and didn't think it should be mandated. And the legislator said the problem with the bill was that it would be mandated, despite the fact the bill actually just calls for an end to the state restrictions on it. So am I frozen?
No, you're good. You're good. I was just going to say.
He was called out for not having actually read the legislation accurately. And oddly, I guess he's an honest Republican because he's the one that voted in favor of the legislation after learning that it wasn't what he thought it was. But I think that experience just reminded me in general of what we always say, the whole damn system is guilty as hell. We have legislators voting on bills they haven't read. We have police officers covering up for each other. We talk about Kim Potter's actions in Daunte Wright's murder, but she was part of the cover-up of Kobe Heisler's murder by her Brooklyn Center police colleagues just a year and a half ago. We talk about the role of medical examiners in these cases. There was a retired forensic pathologist, Lindsay Thomas, who gave some great testimony against Derek Chauvin this week in court, but in fact, she was part of the cover-up of Justin Tigan's murder. We really need broader systemic change, and not just these, one success is never going to be enough for us. We have seen every night this week, people have been in Brooklyn Center. People are there right now. And the response we've seen from the governor and every police force in the state, a starring role for the state patrol and Colonel Langer again is the abuse and violence rained down upon protesters and community members. I think that's the last thing I wanted to share. Where I live is close to Lake Street in South Minneapolis. And we have, just like many neighborhoods, I know they are up on Broadway too, National Guard with their tanks and their army trucks in full gear, armed in our neighborhoods. And this is how they want us to live. And we're not willing to do that. So I want to thank, obviously, of course, the protesters who have been boots on the ground every day this week. My boot got broken on Sunday night, so my boot's been staying home. But also, the people on this call have been tireless out there every day, every night in the streets, and every day at the state legislature, on the Zoom, I suppose, at the city halls. But also, every one of us has our phones ringing off the hook with community members who are experiencing new traumas, with folks who are under arrest and need to figure out how to get out. There's just an endless amount of work, but we also have an endless amount of passion and love and commitment to make sure that we bring these tragic circumstances to an end once and for all. So it's really an honor for me to work with all of you. I'll just end there.
Thank you. I wanted to invite Zainab if you wanted to add some points as well from today, particularly around the bills, as well as just some of these victories, and really just putting the pressure on to get the right charges.
Goes a little weird sometimes, but I think with what's happening with the bill, all of us on this call have been working since the first day of session. I think we did a press conference, and every single day since then, we've been begging these people to just give it a hearing. And all the excuses that we've heard have been, oh, we got to save the seats. And if we bring this bill in, it's a little too radical. It's a little too left. It's too much money. We can't do it right now. Bring it next year when it's all Democrats. And the people that are saying this are the people who run on these policies of wanting to fix the justice system or hold police accountable. They were the ones that were holding us back. And it took another Black man dying at the hands of the state for them to even take a look at it now. And I think it just shows a lot of the hypocrisy that goes on in the state legislature. And when it comes to the bogus charges that were brought this today, I think I'm 100% sure that none of us had faith in Washington County. And that's why from day one, we've asked for the governor to step in and give it to the AG so that he can assign a special prosecutor. And that still stands, because today was a testament to what they could do. And that was just them bringing a bogus charge. And so hopefully now that the bills are now getting more traction, they will pass. And without it, there does not need to be a negotiation on the budget until Black lives do truly matter in the state.
Absolutely. I want to bring in Michelle. I know Jonathan mentioned about talking about the bills, particularly the civilian. You were called upon a lot today by Representative Thompson to kind of help answer some of those questions. Can you kind of maybe talk a little bit about that? Nope, I think you're on mute there.
Oops, sorry about that. Alrighty, so what I wanted to talk about is, yes, we all played a great role, I think, today in trying to answer the questions of the legislators, trying to clarify for them, because they, honestly, these people are looking for any excuse to not do what they need to do. I'm not forgetting that back when we first started talking to these legislators, now realize that some of these bills are leftovers from the summer that we didn't get passed in the summer. But when we started talking to these legislators in January, we were getting all of this like, well, why can't you talk to the post board? And why can't you just do this or do that or whatever? And it was so ridiculous, because it's like, you're the legislators. We can't tell the post board to do something that you're not willing to do. They make rules to follow the legislation, not the other way around. And so today, even with all that has happened, there was some serious, really serious, resistance, especially to civilian oversight, but all of our bills. And, law enforcement was having a fit about the idea of sharing the body camera videos, even though they have no basis for doing that. They were having a fit about it. And, to me, it was crazy. We wrote a letter to them last night to outline our positions on our bills. And we ended the letter with this quote, and I really, really want to read this because I think people, need to understand how this is going. What we said was, in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd and now Daunte Wright, law enforcement has forfeited the right to be the sole determinants of what public safety looks like in our communities. Their continued resistance to common sense reforms is no longer acceptable. And that is the facts. It's no longer acceptable. Every time we bring these bills up in a legislative committee, the first thing that, half of these fools do is they go, well, what's the sheriff's position on it? What's the police chief association position on it? Who cares? Who cares? You have had your chance. You blew it. Sit your asses down. Oops, excuse me, I'm supposed not to say that word, I suppose. But sit your behinds down. You have no more legitimacy. And bit by bit, the governor and some of these other legislators are finally getting a little bit of a clue, but they're still not where we need them to be. We absolutely have to bring all of these bills and more across the finish line. And so, that was what we spent our day, some of us doing today, trying to get these legislators to get a daggone clue. So, and some of the questions they asked were so idiotic. Where has this ever worked before, civilian oversight? So of course I had to bring out my magic tricks and tell them all the things that work and how they work and why they work. But they're just looking for any excuses to not pass common sense legislation that would stop the nonsense that puts, that allows police to do the things that they do to people. And, and it's killing people, but it's also brutalizing people routinely. People have to live under the threat of constant brutalization and possibly death. And we have to bring forward these bills, and that these are just the first step, because we're going to go right back at them hard again next session as well.
All right, and if I can just add something to that, I just want to point out and remind viewers that last week the Senate defeated a measure that would rid our police departments of officers who were affiliated themselves with white supremacy. And that's the state that we find ourselves in today. I often say in my press conferences that law enforcement for decades has been pushing legislation to chip away at our civil liberties, our rights, and our communities by pushing policies that absolve them of their crimes, weaken and remove the checks of accountability, transparency, and justice, with access to unlimited resources and unfettered access to our elected leaders. And this is what has been happening for decades until now. And the police departments are coming unwound. Matter of fact, they're starting to writing letters because they're intimidated by speaking up and saying it to our faces when we're testifying. So we're doing our part, and we need you guys to do your part too. I don't know if Jelani, if you guys can put up the action for people.
Yep. I'm going to put that up right now. And one of the things that we've asked folks to do is really you can go to MN Coalition. This is a website we created for this purpose, mncoalition.org. And it has a take action. Once you click on it, you'll be able to come directly here and take action. So since we've been on the call, we've probably had about 100 folks that have taken or have been on this live about taking the action. Once you come down here, you can fill out information. You'll get a message. You'll see a message that we've crafted, and that message that we've crafted will actually be helpful, because then you can add more to it. So you get a chance to add to that message if you want, customize it a little bit. So here's the website again. I have an opportunity to go directly there. Let's see here.
If I could, Jaylani, we have one of the people on the site is asking about what we were talking about with white supremacists. And I want to make sure people understand the legislature had brought forward a bill, and they had, and that bill would ban, would allow the post board, which is the licensing agency for the state, it would allow the post board to pull the license of any officer who's found to be a member of, supporter of known white supremacist organizations. And the Republican-led state Senate voted down that bill because apparently they seem to think it's okay to have white supremacists within law enforcement. And that to me is just appalling. I mean, this should have been a no-brainer, right? It should have been passed easily. And it's hard for me to understand why what possible rationale they could come up with for thinking it's acceptable for police who, after all, have guns and the authority of the state to use them, to have white supremacists on police forces. And Nakima, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Well, I see in the comments someone named Todd Sanford replying to a Black woman asking if she's wearing a tinfoil hat, which I think is completely inappropriate and unacceptable. I'm not sure of the purpose behind being disrespectful to a Black woman concerned about white supremacy. We all know that many of our police departments in Minnesota and around the nation have been infiltrated by white supremacist groups and those who are connected to the Ku Klux Klan. The FBI did a report about it over 5 years ago, and it has not been taken seriously, although the FBI has documented this as a fact. So it should be a no-brainer to eliminate the opportunity for people to become police officers who have ties to white supremacist groups. In Minnesota, the KKK came in the 1920s and they never left. They are still involved in far too many of our systems, including policing, and our legislature needs to uphold what we are asking them to do, which is to ensure that all of our law enforcement agencies have proper checks and balances to root out obvious ties to supremacist groups. It's really a no-brainer from my perspective.
Absolutely.
And I like to add, it doesn't matter if you have on regular clothes or if you have on a police uniform or you have on a Ku Klux Klan, the white sheets that they would wear. Racially motivated murders, it doesn't matter the attire that you wore when you carried out a racially motivated murder. And there's a lady that reached out to me earlier today. It's a lady that I did a interview on her radio show. And she claims that she actually knew this officer, Kim, personally. And that Kim bragged about profiling people. And that's why they ended their friendship. And so she was blown out of the water to see her in this situation, but she wasn't surprised because of the things that she has heard her say in the past. This woman wants to come forward, but she's concerned about the safety of her children. So when you guys talk about, typically people come forward with this stuff and bad things happen. And it's time for that to change. People should be able to come forward with the truth and not fear for their lives and not fear for their children's lives. Because right is right and wrong is wrong. And it is a clear indication that these are racially motivated murders. That's why we have a relationship with Emmett Till's family, because we believe that these murders are closely connected, no matter if it was a police uniform that was worn at the time or not. That's all.
Thank you for that, and it's important that as we learn more about Kim for this to come out, and that's why we're asking for appropriate charges right now, and we don't think we got appropriate charges, and this was an issue we talked about quite extensively in all of these cases, Jamar Clark and Philando Castile and And all of those individuals that many of you don't know, but do exist. We have 400 plus names since 2000. And county prosecutors who work directly close, work very closely with the police stations and police departments, and police officers are the ones now have to bring up these charges. And there's a clear conflict of interest, and that's why we're asking for outside investigation and also outside prosecution. It just makes more sense that way. And the BCA has historically not done any kind of really an honest investigation into these matters. And they're usually the first ones taking over the scene. And then there's this back and forth about who's responsible, when did the responsibility come on board. And sad to hear that Daunte was out there for nearly 5 hours. His body was out there for 5 hours because they were playing football with a human being that they took its life from. So we've got a lot of work to do. I just want to give folks kind of a chance to kind of maybe make a last minute a reminder as we can keep going. Michelle, do you want to? Oh, go ahead, Nikki.
I was just going to say real briefly that I don't want white people to get too comfortable because these second-degree manslaughter charges have been brought. As we push for stiffer charges, I've seen on Facebook where white folks are like, oh, I think that's an appropriate charge. Well, where were you when Mohammed Noor was being inappropriately charged with third-degree murder, which was unprecedented in the state of Minnesota? White people have not protested the fact that those charges were brought against him for an accidental shooting of a white woman. But yet people are comfortable that a white woman is not being held fully accountable under the law. Allyship means listening to Black people, pushing and advocating for the changes that we are saying that we need to see, and stepping up to the plate, because these changes have happened on the backs of Black youth, Black advocates, and allies who are really about, actually accomplices, who are really about this life, like the people on this call, who day in and day out, up front and behind the scenes, do the heavy lifting to make these things possible. So if you have people in your network, when you're posting these updates and they're like, oh, I think it's appropriate, or oh, some of those same people were the ones who didn't think the woman should be charged in the first place. But because we refuse to allow this woman to get away with this theory of an accidental shooting, that is why those charges have been brought, even though they are not enough. So we need for you all to step forward, to be vigilant, and to do your part and help carry some of this weight. Like, we are literally tooth and nail, day and night, barely sleeping, barely eating, doing what we have to do to make change possible. And all we're asking is for you all to take this more seriously and be more vigilant about advocating for change and pressing the white folks who you know in power to do their part and help change this system. So that's all I had to say, because I'm just frustrated when I see people, oh, I think it's appropriate. It's because you can relate to that white woman who did that. And we're saying what she did was unconscionable, unacceptable, and resulted in the unnecessary loss of life. She helped profile a young Black man. Now he's dead because of her own racial biases and anti-Blackness, and she needs to be held accountable. And how many Black people has she put in jail and prison that cases will never be reviewed, even though we know that she has bias towards us in her heart?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's pretty powerful. Thank you for saying that. And I've been saying this too about, sympathies and people just feeling bad. Well, we also need to think about solutions, because we all want this to stop. That's why all of you are like, Bill, why are we talking about bills? We just want to do something that will help bring some solution to this problem. One of the most interesting things that we've learned in this moment is Mayor Mike Elliott of Brooklyn Center. He had to jump through hoops to actually do what he needed to do. It's a city that did not even give the mayor any real authority, and the city manager, then also you have a police chief, and so you have layers upon layers of policy that shields police officers and police conduct from having any transparency, oversight, and accountability. That's why we need these bills to move forward, because it starts the process of holding police accountable. We need solutions right now because we're tired of, as John Thompson said, it's more than likely someone else is going to be killed. They are deadly. These people are deadly. They bring guns. They're ready to just show up as warriors. They stopped the warrior policy training in Minneapolis Police Department. Guess what? The union is offering it now. The union is training people how to become warriors. That's the kind of police we have in the city of Minneapolis and across the state. I was talking to a reporter this day who said, well, is this happening in Minneapolis? And, why would some things in Minneapolis, things are happening in the Twin Cities, why would they be forced on people in rural areas? The reality is most of these people think that everything's happening in Minneapolis. It's happening everywhere. It's happening in small towns. It's happening everywhere in this country. And so we really need to do something about that. So that's my last word. I want to give folks to say last word and we can wrap it up here.
So, Jaylani?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I just want to throw down about that as well. We have a 24-hour hotline that's statewide for police brutality complaints. And I'm going to tell you that we get plenty of complaints from outstate areas. This notion that this is a Twin Cities problem is a complete lie. And all of these sheriff's association that are talking about everybody in our community loves us. Well, I can tell you that that's just plain not true. The other thing I want to just mention is that these bills are not just about, and it's as important as that is, it's not just about addressing the police critical incidents when they kill someone. It's about preventing those incidents. And it's also about preventing brutality, just general brutality, because for all of the police killings and shootings, which are atrocious and way too common, we have, probably 25 or 40 times, I don't even know what the times are, more day-to-day brutality complaints. And I feel strongly that it's allowing those day-to-day complaints to continue unaddressed that creates the climate that allows these brutal murders to occur. And so we have to get at those and address all of the background and not just wait until something bad happens. We've got to be proactive and stop it from happening. And that's what these bills and all of this other work that we're doing is about. And so thank you all for supporting this work, and make sure you make those phone calls, send those emails, do the things we're asking you to do, because we are working, like Nakima said, working around the clock, but we cannot do this by ourselves. We really, really need you there. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Jess, Tashira, Jonathan, go ahead.
If I could just real quick, I just got a text message about the arrestees, and what I have just learned is that it's Hennepin County Attorney's Office, Mike Freeman's office, that is trying to decide whether or not to charge those young people with gross misdemeanor or felony charges. That's why they're being held on probable cause. Felony charges ruin lives. And I'm going to do an update to our post about this from earlier, because that's not who we were having people direct their calls to, but that's what we're going to ask you to do now. So look for some posts later tonight. We need to call Mike Freeman's office and insist that he not bring felonies against these young people who are out protesting the murder of one of our community members. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure people are aware.
Thank you. Tashira, Jonathan.
Yeah, I often say out there on the boot with my boots on the ground, do not be the white moderate who thinks we should wait for a better season or a better time. The time is now, and you must take a side, the side of accountability and justice for all, or the side of division, brutality, and privilege. We have to change, and the only way that we're going to change is by passing meaningful and substantive policy that forces the change. We can't keep on doing what we're doing and expecting a different result. It's like we're on a bad record that's stuck on repeat, and our communities are the ones that are suffering for it. The families are the ones who are suffering for it, and we have to do something. And our legislative initiatives that we're pushing forward is that something, and we need people to support our initiatives. We need you to call your representative, your senators, the governor's office, send your letters and tell them that we need change, because if we don't get change, it's only going to get worse, and we have to do our part as a community.
Absolutely.
I would like to say thank you to everybody that's on this call. Thank you for everybody that's out there fighting with and for our families. We've taken the ultimate sacrifice. You know, there's everything that has been done to our people when it comes to our Black men being locked up for crimes they didn't commit. When it comes to the brutality that we face on the street, when it comes to the housing and the employment, the disadvantages that our people face. But out of all of that, the loss of life is the ultimate sacrifice. And our families have paid that. We've paid the ultimate sacrifice with losing the people that we love the most. And you guys are tirelessly fighting on behalf of our families. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And to our white allies, I want to say this is not, or even the people that are not our allies, this is not political versus community. This is not about white versus Black. This is about right versus wrong. That's what it boils down to. And so it's time. There is no in between. There is no in between. You got to choose. You have to choose today, first of all, whom you will serve. And if you're not completely for the people, then you're for the institution that created this. And enough is enough. Thank you all for everybody and all that you do to fight for our loved ones. You don't know what it means. It means the most, because we hurting and our families are hurting very bad. To be re-traumatized like this over and over and over again, it means a lot to have you guys. You mean the world no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you. Nakima, do you want to close us off?
I just want to encourage us to celebrate the small victories, because sometimes we go months and years with nothing to celebrate because of the uphill battle we're often climbing. So the fact that there were charges in this case is a small victory. It's a partial victory. It's not complete. And again, the fact that the power of the people is responsible is something to celebrate. So let's take this energy and let's keep persevering in the spirit of Daunte Wright, in the spirit of George Floyd, in the spirit of Justin Tigan, Marcus Golden, Cordell Handy, and so many, too many others who have paid the ultimate price, as Tashira said, who should still be here today. We have a lot of work to do, but again, if we work together, we can continue to make change. So thank you all for taking the time to tune in tonight. I know everybody's tired, but this is a way of continuing to ground us, give us that energy so we can continue moving forward. So we love y'all. Thank you guys again for tuning in.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Good night. We'll see you hopefully soon. Thank you. Keep supporting us. If you're watching this on another time, please make sure you share with your family and friends and colleagues. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night.